name is Kenny Ortiz, and I'm the Director of Finance for DoSomething.org. A budget is your financial plan. Before you go into a project or a venture, you create a projection of any money that you're hoping to receive and any money that you think you would spend. One thing to keep in mind when you're creating a budget is sometimes you really have to do a lot of research. You don't want to just create numbers out of thin air or what you think certain expenses might cost. A budget could be something very simple that you can either create on a piece of paper or you can create it on an Excel spreadsheet. You want to have three basic categories: your revenue, your expenses, and your net income. The first category is always your revenue, and within that revenue, it could be as simple as just one line. Maybe you say you're only holding one event, but if you're hoping to have a more long-term project, then you maybe want to break it down within a few lines. So maybe you want to have a category for individual donations, another one for foundations, maybe grants, maybe special events, and then you want to add all those categories up, and that would be your total revenue. The second part of your budget is always your expense line, and your expenses can be as detailed as possible. There are different kinds of expenses. There are fixed expenses and there are variable expenses. Those are the two broader categories. A fixed expense is an expense that you know you're going to incur month after month. That could be like your rent, your telephone, staff salaries, insurance. Variable expenses are expenses that you know are going to come up but are not necessarily going to be the same or not going to be every month. So for example, meals, transportation, supplies. Those are variable expenses, and those are the ones maybe you want to focus when you're thinking about cutting your costs. Your net income is what you have minus what you owe. So you're going to take all your revenue and you're going to subtract all your expenses, and whatever's left over, that's your net income. Tracking spending simply means making sure that you know where your money's going. So every month you want to look at what you paid out and where you stand for the end of that month. An expense report is something you create after you incurred the expenses. So you first create your budget, then you go out and you do your project, you do your event, and then you go back and say, okay, what did those expenses actually work? So you want to compare what your projections were originally, and maybe you want to create a second column of what your actual costs were. And you want to see how close to your projections you actually were. When someone asks you for a budget, you want to be as transparent as you possibly can. Transparency is important, particularly in a nonprofit organization, because you depend on the good faith of your donors. So your donors want to make sure that you're doing with your money what you said you were going to do. It's always good to keep in mind that a lot of people that give you money want always to see how you spend that money. So when you receive a grant from an individual or an organization, always make sure that you know what their expectations were. So a lot of times it might be that they say, you know what, we gave you $1,000, we want to make sure that you spend that $1,000, and then you have to report back at the end of your project or your program. So that's why it's so important to keep track of all your expenses to make sure that you're in alignment or that you're in compliance with the donor.